Welcome to CryptoBeat Live, where we bring you all the latest and greatest in crypto and privacy. My name is Naomi Brockwell. You are tuned into NBTV, and I'm absolutely delighted to have one of my favorite people ever on the show. We have Jebb from Crypto. Jebb, welcome to the show. Jebb, how are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much, Naomi. How are you?
Yeah, I am great. You just came back from a conference. I'm at a conference. You'll notice I don't have my usual set behind me. So we are right in the thick of things and bringing you all of the latest. Let's dive into it. These are all of the topics we have for today. So we've got Biden. He's talking about crypto as a national security threat. We will tell you what we think of that. We've got Railgun, a cool new project that is bringing privacy to Ethereum. Paul Krugman. I love it when Paul Krugman says dumb stuff because then we get to do reaction videos. So we are going to talk about all the dumb things that Paul Krugman, has said in his latest op-ed. We've got Assange. Oh my goodness, this is such a deep topic to dive into. I just did an interview with Assange's brother, Gabriel Shipton. So we're going to play some highlights from that. And I'm basically going to bring you up to date on everything in the Assange case. Some of you may not be familiar with all of that, so we'll dive straight into that. And we've also got a new bill that is looking to be a disaster for crypto. I'm going to walk you through what Coin Center has to say, but let's start off with our A block. Jebb, dive into it. So Biden. Biden has said, that crypto is entering the regulatory fray, and there's going to be a government-wide strategy to regulate cryptocurrencies. He's saying a lot of things that don't look too promising. Can you give me your kind of bird's eye view of all of this?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing that I think we need to realize is the regulation is coming, has always been coming, and it will come. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. While I was at the North American Bitcoin Conference last week, I actually interviewed two people, Mary Beth Buchanan, and I interviewed someone else. I forgot his name, but I interviewed two people from Merkle Science, and one of them worked in FBI, and the other one worked in Mary Beth Buchanan was a district attorney and a prosecutor, and both of them have worked very heavily with regulatory bodies over the last couple of years, teaching them about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And they've told me, yeah, crypto regulation is coming, but the industry is not supposed to be, held down by regulations. It's supposed to be bolstered by it. We're supposed to be putting up guidelines and guardrails. And they're very enthusiastic about the next 10 years, thinking that, in 10 years, regulation is not going to be something that's stifling innovation in the United States, but something that's actually going to be allowing major multinational organizations to join in the cryptocurrency space, and for them to know how the market's actually going to be regulated so that they can build their future here. But as far as what's going on with this, there was actually an anonymous source, and I hate anonymous sources just as much as the next guy. In the last 5 or 10 years, there's been way too many of them coming out. But an anonymous source close to the White House said that the White House is looking at Bitcoin as a matter of national security. The direct quote was a matter of national security, but the undertone there is that Bitcoin is being perceived as a threat to national security. And to that, I would say, yes, it is a threat, but it's not to national security, it's to the national hegemony over the currency. And the thing about what the United States does, and what every country that has its own currency does, is that they use the power over their currency to maintain sovereignty over their people. And that's something that I don't really appreciate. The government, as soon as it forgets that it gets its power from the people, is the moment that it begins down a path of tyranny and authoritarianism. So yes, we are going to see regulation coming from the executive branch and from the legislative branch, but we don't know what that's going to look like just yet, at least in this area. We know what some other things are going to look like relatively soon. We don't know what it's going to look like just yet, but what we can do as voters and citizens of the United States, if you're in the United States such as I am, is reach out to your congressperson, tell them, hey, we want regulation, but we want regulation that is going to be conducive to the growth of this space. I'm a small government kind of guy, but there are times and places where regulation is going to be very helpful to the development of the industry. And I think that if regulation is done right, it can actually be a very good thing.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on with everything that you've said. And just looking at the way different countries are regulating CBDCs and all of this, the way they're talking about this. I mean, the US currently is saying that the National Security Council memorandum will basically task federal agencies to assess the risks and opportunities that crypto poses. Keep in mind, they're assessing the risks to the nation state, not to the nation's citizens. That's never in their mind. Yep. They're looking at protecting the state there, and they're going to delve into the details of a central bank digital currency. I mean, in the past, Biden hasn't been great on crypto. He's proposed that only banks be allowed to issue stable coins. The Treasury Department is a long way to go with figuring figuring out how they're going to define a broker. I think they were given a deadline end of last year. They just didn't make that. So we've got a lot of regulation coming down the pipe. And when you have the President of the United States talking about how crypto is a national security risk, it does get a little bit scary there. Any final words on this, Jebb, before we move on to the next topic?
Yeah, well, I mean, the final word I'll say, unless I've missed something, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that a lot of this is unconfirmed so far as the national security stuff. It was people that are close to the White House, and they're anonymous sources, at least what I was reading. This might be something else, but we need to make sure that we wait and see until something is confirmed. It's very easy to get caught up in the what if game, like what if there's bad regulation? What if they try and ban Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies? Until we have confirmation that's going to happen, it's nothing more than FUD, and we need to remember to keep our emotions out of our trading.
That's some good advice there. So let's move on to the next topic, where we're talking about something a little more fun, a little more exciting than whatever the White House has to say about crypto. So Railgun, an interesting new project. They are basically trying to bring privacy to the DeFi world. The idea that crypto is completely public on all of these public ledgers, like that's great for transparency. That's great for these smart contracts. And when you're entering into a financial agreement with someone. But the double-edged, the other side of that double-edged sword is that all of your transactions are out there for people to see. So what Railgun is doing is they're saying, listen, let's take out all of this publicly identifiable information and let's verify these smart contracts using zero-knowledge proofs. Really interesting. They're not just on Ethereum, bunch of chains. But I'm going to throw this to you, Jebb. What were your thoughts on this project coming out?
Yeah, well, I think it's all based on the fact, as you can see right there, Railgun protocol is deployed on Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, Polygon with Solana and Polkadot launches soon, is launching all over the place, and it's announced plan to add NFT support in the coming weeks. I think one of the things you have to remember is that in cryptocurrency, there's a balancing act that we're trying to play between being pseudonymous is the term that's often used for Bitcoin, and not necessarily being fully anonymous, but also not necessarily being fully transparent, because you have to walk a fine line of if it's totally open and you can see literally everything that goes on, then there's no privacy and you can track that. And then you get something like the National Gun Registry where you can see, oh, these people, or there's a registry where you can see people that can't own firearms. So you can go and say, okay, this guy can't own a firearm. I'm going to go rob his house because he can't defend himself. When you get into territory like that, if it's too open, you can't really protect yourself because everybody sees your transactions. But on the other hand, that if you have everything completely locked down, then you run into a regulatory issue where regulators are going to try and crack down on that because there's a gap in the chain of custody of any cryptocurrency, and you do actually implement the ability for money laundering in there because you can't see where the money's going. So you have to make sure that when you are implementing privacy in a cryptocurrency, that you're implementing it in the right way. And I'm not a blockchain developer. I don't have the answer on how to do that correctly. If I did, gosh, if anybody has that, they're worth a lot of money. But you have to balance being open so that you can have being open so that you have accountability and privacy. And people are going to have different tastes, and people are going to prefer different types of coins. That's why there's so many projects. But I think one of the things that this project does, it reminds us just how important privacy is to the cryptocurrency market. And I think Bitcoin illustrated best the way to do it. Keep the transactions public, but don't let anybody know who's making the transactions. That has been the tried and true method for the last 13 years that Bitcoin's been around, and I think that will remain the best way to handle privacy personally.
Absolutely. Privacy is paramount. It's important that people realize that.
Right.
And honestly, I agree with a lot of the people out there. Like, I interviewed Nathan Wilcox of Zcash not too long ago, and he was saying how in the future, we're not going to have things called privacy coins because everyone is going to have to implement some level of privacy. It's going to be demanded by consumers as we start to realize how much of our information is out there. We get into crypto, someone sends us a few dollars in a wallet. We're like, it's ones and zeros. I'm kind of confused. And I'm not going to look into it too deeply, but this is cool to get involved with. Takes them a while after using this to realize, all my information is out there. They have a history laid out publicly on the blockchain that shows how much money was in my account, where that money was sent. It gets to be a dangerous situation for privacy.
Yeah.
Now with Railgun, DCG has poured a bunch of money into this. So DCG, of course, digital currency group, they invest in a lot of interesting projects. They put I think it's $10 million into this. So they've staked over $10 million of Railgun's native Rail token. Then they've donated over $7 million in stablecoins to the project's decentralized autonomous organization treasury, which is also interesting. I mean, the Foundry Labs is a different company of theirs. It's like a subsidiary, and they've also devoted resources from Foundry Labs to the back end to make sure the back end is strong enough to handle high demand. Like DCG is kind of betting that this is going to become a big thing. So it's pretty interesting. and pretty interesting that they are, they're such a large investor in different projects, but they don't necessarily always add money to people's decentralized treasury without having like an admin key or anything. So this is kind of a unique case in that. But final words on all this before we move on.
Yeah, well, I think another thing to think about is that there are other ways to handle privacy other than just, shut it down or keep it fully open. It actually isn't so much a dichotomy as it's more like a triangle and it's a trichotomy, I guess you could say. Charles Hoskinson talked about this in an interview with Dan over on Crypto Capital Venture about how what you're going to be able to do with blockchains in the future is have authority over what information is actually going to be given to different parties. I saw somebody speak about this at TNABC about how they have a project where your digital identity, you're going to be able to say, hey, I'll give you this so that you can serve as to me, but you're going to pay me because it's my identity, it's my data. And I think that's actually the more complex answer to the question of privacy, is that if people take back control of their own identity and of the different facets of that, like location, likes, preferences, metadata, cookies, all of that, and that can be done on blockchain, then that will be hopefully one of the solutions to one of our time's biggest questions, which is privacy of data.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to make a point. I think you guys probably hear a lot of background noise from me right now. There's like kids and there's splashing and there's, as I said, I'm at a conference at the moment. I can invite them to join if you want, just let me know. But just wanted to let you know that I didn't just invite like a bunch of kids to my studio at the moment, like I'm in a public place, and seeing people that I know. I do want to give a huge shout out to IT. He just sent a super chat. He said, thanks, NB. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate that. Don't forget to hit the like button, everyone. Hit the subscribe button. I really appreciate that. That helps me get in your feed because YouTube does not like to show people crypto videos. So if you hit that subscribe button, you hit that notification bell, that lets all of you guys know when we're releasing a video. So it really helps out the channel. But let's keep going to our final chat here. So Krugman. Oh, it's one of my favorite topics to hate on is whatever Krugman has written about recently. He wrote an op-ed where he says that crypto is the new subprime. Subprime meaning he's talking about the subprime housing market. He's talking about the big '08 crash. He's talking about how all of these people basically bought into houses, given ninja loans, and then the market crashed and everyone defaulted on their payments. People lost a huge amount of money. Poor people got hurt. And so he's saying crypto's the new thing for that. It's hurting people. It's hurting poor people. Jebb, what are your broad view takeaways from all of this? I have a lot to say, but I want to get your thoughts first.
Well, I think everybody builds their career on something, and it seems like he has built his career on being so laughably wrong that he gets made fun of and people talk about him, and it's working because we're talking about him right now. He's been against Bitcoin for a very long time, and no, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are not the new subprime. It's not, the subprime mortgage crisis. It's not negative amortization. It's not all of the things that led to the 2008 financial crisis. That was led by governments and banks that got too greedy and a centralized system that was so easy to collapse that whenever you hit it, that's exactly what happened. It collapsed. And, the 2008 financial crisis is a massive can of worms that we probably don't need to get into here. But what I will say is that anybody who thinks that Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme, anybody who thinks that it is comparable to like Tulip Mania or subprime mortgage crises, I challenge them, what is value? Why do people value things? And there are many different reasons why people value things. Either it fills a need, such as, food, water, shelter, housing, clothing, running water, internet, plumbing, utilities, transportation. In this case, scarcity, the storage of value. That's what Bitcoin does. It fulfills a basic human need, the ability to solidify the storage of something that you own. And the most tangible thing that we own is our money. The most commonly, the most pervasive thing you might say that we own is our money. And that's what Bitcoin does, is it gives us the ability to not only own our money, but be secure that our money is going to be worth something in the future, hopefully more than what it's worth right now. And if he doesn't see that, then he needs to do his research. And if he still thinks, even after seeing that it's not true, then he's probably just trying to get attention, which is what it seems like he's always doing. So that's my opinion.
He loves doing that. He loves the attention. Well, Krugman has been famously wrong about technology in the past. He famously once said that the internet would have no greater impact on the world, no lasting impact, more than a fax machine. So equating the internet, which has completely transformed society, to the fax machine, is a pretty good one. But I'll also say that this article, this op-ed was so off base because he's equating a situation where Freddie and Fannie, which are these two government-sponsored enterprises that basically were given quotas by HUD, by the government, to say you have to buy a certain amount of mortgages. You have to buy back these mortgages. This is the way we're going to fund this giant housing market. I mean, it started with the Bush, actually started with the Clinton administration, this big push for American home ownership. Bush continued it, Obama continued it. They all continue it, right? And basically you have these people who are forcing these organizations to have the banks give out more loans than they should. So there comes a certain point where the banks have given all of the loans they can to all of the people who are credit worthy. Then they have to go into the subprime markets. Now, if Fannie and Freddie had these quotas saying, no, actually you have to buy even more housing mortgages, you have to keep buying that, then the banks are like, okay, this is literally a quota that Fannie and Freddie, I mean, they're giving the banks these orders and saying, listen, if you don't do this, there's going to be regulation about like how you'll be able to expand. Like, it was this whole mess that basically the government fueled. Why that is so fundamentally different to what we have in the crypto space is the crypto world is a voluntary world. People are pouring into Bitcoin, not because anyone has forced them to or given them quotas for the amount of Bitcoin that needs to be bought. They're pouring into this world because they're seeing that Bitcoin is a more viable alternative, is an alternative that has better value than government-controlled fiat. So two fundamentally different situations. But the thing that really gets me is that Krugman's response is always more regulation. Let's stop, people being able to do this. Let's stop the people getting hurt. Like, can we stop infantilizing the population? Can we let people make their own choices? Can we trust the people, have done their research? And if they haven't, start an education campaign. If Krugman just started an education campaign, I'd be like, cool, go educate people however you want, Krugman. But he's not. He's calling for the government to come in and stop people from being able to make choices with their own money, which is a disgrace. It's absolutely not something that I think we should endorse as freedom-loving people. But Jebb, I'm going to throw this back to you because I'm just going to rile all day about Krugman, and you guys jump in.
Well, here's the deal. The government was built to serve the people. The people are not there to serve the government. And a lot of people fundamentally misunderstand that. They think that the government is mommy and daddy and they tell the people what to do. And every time you see the government go down that route, you end up in some kind of authoritarian, despotic, tyrannical government. We've seen it happen all around the world. And unfortunately, I don't think that's where America's going. But unfortunately, at the same time, it means that we are seeing some of those tendencies to take away personal liberties and personal freedoms. And this is just another example of it. I would say that anybody who doesn't understand Bitcoin has no business commenting on where Bitcoin is going. And very clearly, he doesn't understand the value proposition. I'd be very surprised if he were able to articulate that Bitcoin is digital, verifiably scarce currency that is built online. It's the first verifiably scarce anything that has ever existed on the internet. But he doesn't like the internet anyway, so I doubt he can articulate that.
He's like, listen, I'm just going to stick to my fax machine. I thought it was truly a revolution right there. Why do I need the internet?
That's communication. The next stage of that's the next step of communication. Fax. Investing in that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We got a super chat from Daniel Forrest. Whoa, Daniel Forrest, you're awesome. Thank you so much for that support. I really appreciate that. He just wrote, thanks. Thank you to you. I appreciate you so much. Everyone, smash that like button, smash that subscribe button. Thank you for being here. Jebb, I'm going to let you go now, but thank you so much for tuning in. Everyone, head over to Jebb's channel after the show. Make sure you follow him. He's a smart guy. He's going to teach you a whole lot about crypto, and I appreciate you coming and sharing your wisdom with us. And we're going to dive into the Assange block now. But Jebb, thank you.
Thank you so very much, Naomi. I can't wait to be back on. Bye-bye.
Awesome. We'll get you back on soon. All right, we're going to dive into Assange. We had some news this week. Basically, there's been news about the appeal process. I think a lot of people hear the word Assange these days and they're like, I'm a bit lost. I don't really know where we are. Wasn't he in Ecuador? Wasn't he like arrested? Wasn't, and people don't really know what he did either. So I'm going to dive into like a brief history overview of the Assange case to update you guys, bring you all to speed. I did a great interview with Gabriel Shipton. He's Assange's brother the other night. Check out the full thing. I really recommend. It's an hour long, but honestly, I mean, Gabe just dives into so much corruption that you wouldn't even have heard of. Like, the mainstream media isn't going near this stuff. So I really highly recommend it, but I'll try and bring you the highlights in this next block. So let's take it. I made this teaser for the video, so let's just go to that teaser and get a feel for the interview.
I'm Gabriel Shipton. I'm Julian Assange's brother. The National Security State just doesn't want its secrets exposed, and they're using the Espionage Act to clamp down on publishers. They're afraid of leaks. They're afraid of being surveilled. Julian turned the lens of surveillance around back onto them. They want Julian dead. There's a worldwide movement of people who see this case for what it is. It's a criminalisation of telling the truth, a criminalisation of journalism.
Yeah, it absolutely is a criminalization of journalism. So I'm going to give you a brief history of the case. Then I'm going to dive into some myths that people have spread very deliberately, I might add, about Assange and WikiLeaks. I want to dispel them here because they're so important and they're spread by the media all the time. So we'll just get our facts straight on this show today. So brief history. Now, Assange, he's been detained since he published the 2010 leaked documents, which basically exposed corruption of governments worldwide. And this included the United States. Now, you know that if you expose corruption of the United States, they don't like it very much. So they immediately launched a criminal investigation into WikiLeaks. But on top of that, Sweden suddenly puts out this arrest warrant for Assange. Now, backtrack, obviously, Assange is the founder of WikiLeaks, which is a site that publishes leaked documents. So if you're a whistleblower, a lot of people go to WikiLeaks and say, hey, I'm blowing the whistle. This stuff is going on. It's not above board. I think people should know about it. And so people will send WikiLeaks these documents. They'll print them. They did this in 2010. They had the Iraq war diaries, Afghanistan war logs. They had these all these diplomatic cables. They had a whole bunch of stuff that went out in 2010, and it was not good. It was, you know, and Gabriel dives into the details of exactly what they published, the results of that. Like, it had pretty significant consequences. It uncovered a lot of corruption there. Anyway, this Swedish investigation comes out, says, listen, we're charging you, Assange, you're under arrest. Assange, sure, I'll chat to you guys. Can you? I think this has something to do with the WikiLeaks releases that just happened. So I'll come to Sweden and talk to you about this if you promise that I won't be extradited to the United States. And Sweden keeps like opening and shutting the case, going back and forth. They don't ever give him that guarantee of not being extradited to the United States. So Assange starts to get suspicious. He's like, okay, this is clearly political persecution here. There's something not above board. Anyway, he then goes into asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy. So he's living in London at the time. He seeks asylum. Ecuador grants it. And then Sweden eventually drops that case. They say, well, the evidence has weakened over time. Their key witness, I mean, there's so many details about this, but essentially they just dropped the case completely. Now, Assange lived in the Ecuadorian embassy for 7 years in a room with a single window, right? So this is not a good way for someone to live, but he was there because he was under threat from the US government. We learned a whole bunch about how much of a threat he was under when Yahoo did a report and showed that the CIA literally had assassination plots against him, which is crazy. Like, why aren't we talking about this? Well, this is a journalist, this is a publisher, and they had all these assassination plots. Anyway, life there started to go downhill, as you can imagine. The CIA installed all kinds of high definition surveillance equipment there. They bribed a whole bunch of like cleaning teams at the Ecuadorian embassy to like break in and install this stuff. Like, it was pretty involved. And then lo and behold, regime changes. The former Ecuadorian president, big Assange fan. The next Ecuadorian president, not so much. And 2019, lo and behold, IMF gives Ecuador a $4 billion loan. That week, I think it was, as Ecuador hands over Assange, allows the UK police to come in and drag him out of the embassy. And Ecuador says, you no longer have asylum here. I am sure those events had nothing to do with each other. And there was no corruption in that. But Ecuador literally gets given $4 billion in exchange for Assange. Like, it's just mind-blowing how corrupt this is. Anyway, what is he charged with, you're wondering? That's a great question. He's dragged out of the embassy in Ecuador. He's charged with skipping bail 7 years earlier for something that he's not even charged with anymore. Sweden's dropped those charges. So he's literally now thrown in jail, and not just any jail, Belmarsh prison, which is basically the UK's version of Guantanamo Bay. It's super maximum security prison. He's thrown into Belmarsh. He's there for the maximum possible sentence that can be allowed for skipping bail, which is 50 weeks. So he's living in Belmarsh, imprisoned in Belmarsh prison, and a US extradition request, lo and behold, is unveiled. Now, Now, the extradition request itself, like, first of all, he's been charged with the Espionage Act. The Espionage Act is something from like 1917 that was all about like World War I context. So the government's saying, oh, you know, this, oh, I've got, no, my bandwidth's not doing too well. No worries. Sorry, guys. I'll try and talk slower so you don't miss anything. But the Espionage Act is something that says you cannot do anything that goes against the US military or gets in their way or impedes their success, right? The US military. Assange is an Australian citizen. He was living in the UK when he supposedly, released this stuff, then did the stuff that he's being charged with. Why on earth would Assange have any allegiance to the US military? How is the US government even able to charge him with an Espionage Act, which says you can't do anything? Like, I mean, it'd be like China coming in and saying, like, journalist from America, you wrote a report that, you know, badmouthed us. We're going to come in and charge you with going against the Chinese military. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So it's just one of the, terrible things that just doesn't add up in this case. Now, the actual charges, if you dig into them, the indictment, it just amounts to criminalizing journalism, and it revolves around Assange taking measures to protect the identity of his source. Now, the Obama administration actually decided they couldn't even pursue a case against Assange because it would amount to criminalizing journalism, put freedom of the press at risk. Now, the Trump administration came in and said, actually, we're going to go ahead with the charges. And then the Biden administration came in and said, yeah, we're going to continue the charges. So it's not, I mean, it's just crazy. So the history of the case of where we are now is Julian appealed the extradition when it was first place. He won the case. He was granted, they basically denied the US's request for extradition, saying that, you know, Assange is not in a good mental state. He is at risk of self-harm if we let him go to the US. Look what happened with Chelsea Manning. She was, her sentence was commuted by Obama, and then the US rearrested her for not testifying, and she attempted suicide. So we don't trust you with Assange, is basically what the UK was saying. But then the US appealed that. They won, and then Assange has now, tried for the right to appeal again. He's been granted that right. Big caveat in all of this is that he will now be appealing this final time to the same person that just granted the US the right to extradite him. So he's basically appealing to this high justice and saying, I'm appealing to you to overturn your own decision. So the situation is not good at all. I'm going to dive into, first of all, some myths around WikiLeaks that a lot of people are not aware of. So early on in the early days, a lot of people turned against WikiLeaks. They said this is a giant document dump of unredacted documents. This is putting people's lives at risk. And this is actually not the case at all. Let's go to our SOP from Gabriel.
Julian and WikiLeaks worked very hard to redact these documents. This is a sort of misconception, and it's propagated against Julian to make it seem that he's reckless or he's done something wrong, but it's just not the truth.
Yeah, it is not the truth at all, and it's perpetuated all throughout the media. So it's really devastating to see people parrot that. There was, in fact, a situation, I think, I didn't know this. I've always had a thing that I was like, oh, WikiLeaks, maybe they did put people's lives at risk. It wasn't until I read Glenn Greenwald's book, No Place to Hide, where it talks about this release and says, he tells this story about how the original files that they had were actually hacked and stolen. And then there were these two Guardian journalists who published the password to these files in their book. So Assange actually tried to stop these unredacted documents from being leaked. Here's what Gabriel had to say about that.
He rang the State Department and said, look, we want to work with you to help you to stop these documents from going out.
And who would be releasing these cables? Is this WikiLeaks?
No, we would not be releasing them. We are doing our usual thing of redaction plan.
But the State Department, refused to engage. There's plenty of evidence how Julian, redacted these documents and worked hard to stop this sort of mass unredacted release that he's often accused of.
Yeah, but no one listens to that. It doesn't tell as good a story as painting Assange as this enemy of the state. Now, the next myth that I want to debunk is that Assange hacks these documents himself. You see all the press using the words, he's charged with hacking crimes. This is absolutely not true, actually. If you read the initial DOJ indictment. Like, the DOJ accompanied it with this lovely press release that had in the title hacking charges. So you have this title that says hacking charges, all the press jump on that without actually looking at what the actual charges are. So they, they just perpetuated this myth. Now, the charges Julian is actually charged with, listen close to me and tell me in the comments what profession you think that this describes. He's charged with trying to protect his source. He's charged with chatting with his source via encrypted chat. They mentioned Jabber as the program. Okay. He's charged with using a cloud storage device to share documents with his source. Okay. And he's charged with asking for more information. These are all things written into the indictment, saying things like the conspiracy involved, them using this cloud storage system. Like, this is literally the job of journalists, to do all of the things that I've outlined. There is no hacking. He did not hack government computers to get any documents at all. These are all myths that are perpetuated. You can dive into the details in the Gabe interview if you wanted to check that out. We explain exactly, what they're talking about with this hashed file that, they were trying to get Julian to decrypt. It all had to do with protecting his identity. Now, let's just summarize this by talking about the chilling effects of this. Obviously, there are chilling effects on the media because no one wants to publish documents if anywhere in the world, actually, not just in the United States, if they think that they could just be dragged from whatever country they're in and charged with espionage. But that also puts a chilling effect on whistleblowers. We lose a lot of accountability to the government with this chilling effect because whistleblowers are not going to take the time and put in all the effort and take the chance to put their lives at risk if they don't even know of any place that would be willing to publish these documents. Like, make no mistake, if this had happened before The Guardian released the Snowden revelations, there's almost no chance that they would have gone through with that if they had known that there's a precedent where journalists in the UK can be dragged out and taken to the United States for hurting the US military. So it's a huge thing here. We, as I said, we have lost accountability right now, and it has this terrible chilling effect. So this final question that I'll put to all of you as I summarize this whole Assange situation, like, why are we putting up with this treatment of journalists right now? Like, what can we do to push back, right? Because the US is charging this foreign journalist with espionage, and the UK dragged him out of the Ecuadorian embassy. And, the Australian government has made no attempt to protect a journalist from their country who's been imprisoned. So, like, where is the moral outrage here? Now, there was this great moment in this BBC interview where the president of Azerbaijan actually pushed back against the UK because they said the UK was feigning moral superiority when it comes to a free press. It's definitely something to think about. But here's a bite from that.
How do you assess what happened to Mr. Assange? Is it a reflection of free media in your country?
We're not here to discuss my country.
Let's discuss.
No, President
In order
Aliyev.
to accuse me, saying that Armenians will not have free media here. Let's talk about Assange. How many years he spent in Ecuadorian embassy? And for what? And where is he now? For journalistic activity. You kept that person hostage, actually killing him morally and physically. You did it, not us, and now he's in prison. So you have no moral right to talk about free media when you do these things.
And even the Chinese Foreign Ministry now, they're bringing it up all the time. As soon as the State Department says anything about press freedom or criticizes them on their human rights record, they bring up Julian and say, well, you've got a publisher and a journalist locked in prison for no reason at all other than publishing truthful information.
So that's kind of encapsulates the Assange saga to date. The next step is Assange obviously appealing. It doesn't have that good a chance. So really what you can do, if you're an American citizen, there's something you can do. You can pressure your local representatives to fight the Biden administration and ask them to drop the extradition. Or if you're an Australian citizen, you can pressure your government to bring Assange home. But they're really the two avenues available to him right now because the UK court system has completely failed him. It's a complete travesty of justice. And it's really scary precedent for journalists all over the world. As a journalist myself, if I start talking about things to hold the government accountable, if anyone leaks me documents, I report on them. I mean, I'm literally threatened with being thrown in prison for the rest of my life. That's the same with all journalists now that the US has set this precedent. So it's really not a good situation. Let's go to these final words from Gabriel.
Were you proud of your brother? What was going through your head at that time?
Always looked up to Julian. He's my older brother. I never thought I'd be in this position where I'd be, advocating for him. Immensely proud of Julian and the work that he's done, and also, he's my hero basically. I think that sums it up. But he's also my brother.
So great interview from Gabriel. Is really appreciative of his time. We dive into this for a full hour. You get a lot more of the content about all the corruption involved with this. It's mind-blowing and very scary. But on that note, let's go to something else that's scary. It's all sunshine and rainbows on this show. You're welcome, guys. I'm here to bring you all of the facts. I'm trying not to sugarcoat them, but there's no way you can sugarcoat any of this stuff. The America Competes Act, it's kind of a disaster for crypto. So the America Competes Act is a new bill that has just been put to the House, and it will very likely pass in some form, unfortunately. But there is a provision that has been added that would be an absolute disaster for crypto. I'll give you a very brief summary of this so that you can understand why it's terrible. There's basically this special measures provision in the bill, and it would essentially give the Treasury unchecked and unilateral power to ban exchanges and other financial institutions from engaging in cryptocurrency transactions. So let's dig into a little bit of how it would do this. Now, the Bank Secrecy Act already gives the Treasury Secretary a whole bunch of power. Now, they're able to identify like primary laundering concerns, and they're able to take special measures to do things like require reporting information. They're also able to prohibit people from doing any exchanges with certain, people or businesses that they deem a risk. So there's a lot of prohibition that goes into that. Now, this is a vast power that the Treasury Secretary already has, but currently, in its current form, that power is checked. Now, it's checked in a couple of different ways. First of all, the law requires that the Treasury engage in public rulemaking. And the second is that it can impose surveillance special measures through orders, but the duration is limited to 120 days. It must also be accompanied by this public rulemaking procedure. So there's an ability to push back, get public comments and change these rules if the public doesn't agree that it's in their best interest. Now, what this new special power rule does is three things. The first is that it adds the certain transmittal of funds to a list of things that can just be unilaterally banned by the Secretary. So the Treasury could literally put out a proclamation that says crypto transactions are banned, and it would totally be within their purview of power. The second thing is it eliminates all public notice and comment requirements. So the Treasury Secretary could just do this without any pushback, without any comments from the public, without Congress approval. They just push this through. And the third is that they eliminate the 120-day limitation for measures imposed without regulation. So this is, it literally took out all the safeguards that the Treasury Secretary currently has. Not only is this terrible for crypto, but if this is adopted into law, it would be terrible for due process. We do not want to be giving unilateral power to a single person or a single organization within the government like that. So it's pretty scary. Coin Center, bless their cotton socks, has been fighting against this. Jerry Brito from Coin Center is just awesome. And he's written this big, long Twitter thread. They've also written an article diving into the details of this. But this is not a good situation. Again, it's one of those situations where you kind of want to talk to your representative and urge them not to pass this, because this honestly is really scary and it is very likely to go through. And I mean, we talk about this regulation all the time on this show, and there's always the latest crisis of the things we need to push back against. But honestly, that's the situation we're in right now, of people just throwing these statutes through, throwing this language through in bills, adding them to other bills, like other must-pass bills as well. And they keep going. It's this barrage because they really do want to stop crypto, and they're going to keep going. But honestly, we have to keep fighting, even if we are getting tired of it. Well, and so it's a bad situation. But honestly, I encourage everyone to take action here. I actually asked Twitter what they thought of this. I got some nice comments back from people, and from people who actually agreed with me about this kind of fatigue. So Chris Troutner actually wrote that that there is this fatigue going on, and it's not a great situation because people will find this hard to take seriously since they have no power over crypto users that have people find it seriously, he's saying, because ultimately the government won't be able to shut down crypto. Chris says that since they have no power over crypto users that have OPSEC or anonymize their crypto and a focus on utility over speculation, they're all protected. But let's keep in mind that they could completely kill mainstream adoption of crypto, and that would affect the price, that would hurt a lot of people, that would destroy innovation, that would push companies offshore. And even if they're offshore, we've learned that the long arm of the US law goes far and wide across the globe. So it would be really devastating to the crypto industry. But I agree with Chris. We're kind of getting concern fatigue right now. But honestly, now's not the time for concern fatigue. I think we really do need to be doubling down and fighting all of this stuff. I admire anyone who's taking the agorist approach and just living their life outside of all this regulation. Like, best of luck to them. But I definitely don't want to see businesses crippled in the United States that deal in crypto. I don't want to see people hurt because they're involved with crypto and the government comes down with some sort of unilateral ban. This is not a great situation. So I just wanted to bring it up in the show, give you a summary of all of this so that you can understand what's going on. Keep updated with that. All right, guys, that's the show for today. I'm sorry for two real pieces at the end there. It's a difficult situation, but we're gonna keep going because we're in this for the freedom and we're in this for the power that it gives back to individuals. So we will keep fighting. Absolutely, and keep educating others. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Thank you so much for being there. And thank you to the two people who sent in super chats. I really appreciate you guys. And I appreciate everyone who's been in here, like commenting in the chat. That really does help the channel as well. So come back to the video, comment on it in the YouTube videos comment section. I appreciate you and go have a wonderful day. And the next time you catch me, I will not be at a conference by a lawn and a pool and all of that. I will be back in my studio, but I appreciate you being here today. Catch you later. Have a great weekend.